We need to let the black voice be heard.
History is not just black history, it's America's history.
We remember the struggle and the sacrifice.
When you see something unjust, you gotta stand up for what you know is right.
We look to the future, to the promise of what should be.
If we are really to teach American history, there's no way to do it and not include the history made by black people.
And now we ask you to join us as we celebrate our heart, our hope, and our history.
We begin here in the historic Deuces neighborhood in St. Pete at the museum that honors the father of black history, Dr. Carter G. Woodson.
And on this day, 97 years ago, Woodson initiated the first Negro History Week.
50 years later, in 1976, it expanded to the month-long observance we continue to honor to this day.
So in honor of Black History Month, over the next 30 minutes, we will show you the hidden history right here in the Bay Area.
We'll talk about that and the strides our community is making to honor our past and create a better future.
And it all starts with why this month matters.
Don't ever forget where you come from. Know your history.
Black History Month originated in 1915 when historian Dr. Carter G. Woodson and Minister Jesse Moreland founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, a group dedicated to preserving and promoting Black excellence.
Had it not been for your ancestors, had it not been for the people before you, you wouldn't be where you're at today.
They sponsored a week-long celebration on the same week of Abraham Lincoln and Frederick Douglass's birthdays. Then President Gerald Ford officially recognized the month-long celebration in 1976.
Black history is about the history of survival.
Dr. Gary Lemons is a professor of African American literature and biblical studies at USF and the artist behind Touch in the Spirit of Love, a new exhibit on display at the Woodson Museum.
We can be different and have black communities, but let's have one communal love for who we are as black people on this land where we were never meant to survive.
His most recent work focuses on reaching hands of all different shades, illustrating the value of love for all humanity.
The history has to be known.
History of a centuries-long fight for respect and equality.
What it was like, that's way back in the NAACP have been bread and water to black people. The reason I wrote so many memberships for the NAACP was it spoke the needs of the black people and the poor people.
Former educator Queen Miller has been a member of the NAACP for decades. Her grandfather was born into slavery, so she knows the value of freedom and has spent her entire life uplifting her community and preserving black history.
Do you think that people need to know black history?
Oh, yes. I don't know what it's all about. I think the governor said it wasn't necessary. He might have not run into all that lynching and stuff where he was raised at.
Are you proud of black people?
Just as proud as I can be.
You know, you can't talk about civil rights without also talking about the Woolworth's lunch counter sit-ins. It was the turning point for Tampa, led by a young man named Clarence Ford and high school students. Courtney Robinson took Clarence, as well as one of those students, back inside the historic Woolworths for the first time in decades.
Clarence Ford and Arthenia Joyner stepped back inside and took us back in time to February 29th, 1960, the day they marched through Tampa into the FW Woolworth store and sat down at the lunch counter, right about where they're sitting today, with the tile backdrop still in place, where 63 years ago, only white people could sit and be served.
We knew that we couldn't, but we decided that we would.
Arthenia was just 16, a student at Middleton High School. Clarence was 20, the president of the NAACP Youth Council.
Once we got in here, I took the first seat. and the rest of them filled in around me. Most of them didn't even have money. We couldn't afford the sandwiches, they sold it to us, but they didn't know that. But it was amazing that first day.
The first of what would be 5 days of marching, taking a seat at the counter, being refused service, and then leaving.
Actually, the second day, the mayor sent the police department, about 8 or 10 officers, and they stood behind us and didn't let anyone get to us. So that was the difference between Tampa and other cities in the South.
Peaceful, but not easy.
We never got served,
We
no.
never got served.
I did have 2 white gentlemen came in, one of them spit on my shoulder.
After the 5th day, Tampa's mayor, Julian B. Lane, called.
It worked. It worked in Tampa. And that's when Reverend Laurie and the city fathers got together at Mayor Lane. They formed the biracial committee, and they sit down and worked it out.
The lunch counters were integrated that September.
Was that the turning point for Tampa?
I think so. It got it started because we went from here. I think the next move was integrating the buses.
Clarence became the first black bus driver for Trailways bus line in Florida.
I'm not going to stop fighting for change.
Arthenia was jailed in 1963 for protesting segregated theaters. She later became a state senator. A historical marker outside the old Woolworths shares their story for those who will continue the fight for equality.
But you still have to challenge the status quo. Change does not occur if you become stagnant.
You know, the owner of the building says she has plans to honor its historic significance in the fight for civil rights. You can also visit the Woolworth sit-in marker on the corner of Polk and Franklin Streets in downtown Tampa.
So many of these trailblazers have been shaped by the communities where they grew up, communities that fought hard to stay alive even when the odds were stacked against them. Let's head to some of the historic African-American neighborhoods from the past that have shaped what we celebrate today. In a segregated St. Petersburg where Jim Crow was king and excluded black people from the world around them, they began to create a world of their own.
This is a story of the resiliency of the descendants of the enslaved.
Welcome to South St. Pete.
So where we are now is on the historic 22nd Street corridor in St. Petersburg, Florida, affectionately known as the Deuces, Tutus. During segregation, this was the home to more than 100 businesses.
Business boosted by the tight-knit community around it.
Right under the underpass is the historic Manhattan Casino.
A stop on the old Chitlin Circuit.
That's where African-American performers went because the music venues were segregated.
And it attracted the legends, Louis Armstrong, Duke Ellington, James Brown, and Nat King Cole, to name a few. But time brought about change.
When you look at the corridor, one of the things that destroyed the 22nd Street vitality was the I-275 interstate. And if we look at interstates throughout the United States, you'll find that probably 85% of historic African-American communities were destroyed.
A story familiar to the nearby gas plant neighborhood, a neighborhood destroyed with the construction of I-175 and Tropicana Field. We also see this in black neighborhoods across the Bay in Tampa.
Every one of these neighborhoods has a slightly different twist that led to their end.
In the 1920s, Dobyville was a thriving black community in Hyde Park.
The construction of what is now the Leroy Selman Expressway definitely damaged it, but that's really more a story of gentrification.
And when you get to downtown, near Amalie Arena,
the property that we're kind of walking towards was homesteaded by a few different African-American families. And that was the beginning of what we know as the Garrison neighborhood.
Established in the late 1800s, it was one of the first black-owned neighborhoods in the city. It wasn't destroyed by the interstate, but today, few signs of it remain.
A place that was an industrial port now is a billion-dollar development. You can look at it and say that's the sign of a healthy city, but how do we make sure that everybody gets an opportunity to take advantage of the growth and success of the city?
A question neighbors of the Scrub and Central Avenue have asked for years. A hub of culture and connection through the 60s, the interstate also played a role in wiping out this historic neighborhood near downtown Tampa.
You know, that interchange couldn't have gone anywhere, but it could have gone slightly some other place, but it didn't. And that's, again, because of economics and the racial attitudes of the times.
Times those who know and love these communities say we should never forget.
It's the American story told from the blood of the enslaved.
How we teach Black history has become a hot topic across the country. Still ahead, we'll show you what's at the heart of that debate.
And the last surviving member of the Courageous 12 shares how a group of Black police officers changed the face of law enforcement in the Bay Area.
They took an oath to protect and serve.
But they say the department they promised to protect did little to protect them.
We're talking about Black officers who look to the law of the land for justice. These walls only tell the parts of the story that are comfortable. Leon Jackson shares the rest. When did you start?
I started on October 3rd, 1963. We could not work in the white neighborhood. We could not arrest whites during that time.
In the 1960s, Jackson was among a dozen St. Petersburg police officers who became known as the Courageous 12. They wore department blues, but they were Black.
We're just a half police officer. They didn't call you Black and African American during that time, see?
Integration, but not really. Leon says police practices were racist.
Then we asked, why we can't get new cars? They say, well, you working in the colored neighborhood.
If they were only half an officer on St. Pete streets, inside the PD, to white colleagues, Leon says they were invisible.
A lot of times, those guys used to walk by us and wouldn't even speak.
And no one spoke to their concerns. Leon says not even superior officers. What did they say to you? They said something about telling you to quit being sensitive or something?
Yeah, don't be so sensitive. This is the Courageous 12.
He wrote about it in Urban Buffalo Soldiers, the story of St. Petersburg's Courageous 12. Leon explains how the men challenged management, even the chief. Eventually, they interrogated the justice system.
When you see something unjust, you got to stand up for what you know is right. Now, this is the title of the lawsuit.
They filed the suit in 1965, documenting insults they endured, their lack of authority, and their outdated cars.
C-52. It stood for Colored Car 52. We went to federal court in Tampa, and Judge Joseph Lieb ruled against us.
But that wasn't the final ruling. In 1968, the NAACP advocated with an appeal.
The Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in New Orleans, Louisiana, ruled in our favor.
Well, I guess they were probably disgusted when you got that win.
Oh, yeah.
A courageous act by 12 Black men whose names now shine.
We were the Jackie Robinson of police integration.
Pioneers for protection who served the system.
Learning our past helps explain the present, but local historians say pushback over conversations about race could threaten progress we have made or could even set us back.
African American history is American history.
But there's ongoing debate over how that history gets taught.
We need to know as much as we can.
On January 12th, the Florida Department of Education sent this letter rejecting an advanced placement African American studies course for high school students, saying it, quote, lacks educational value.
We want education, not indoctrination.
There are also concerns about critical race theory.
One of the reasons it's become so controversial is people just really don't know what it is.
Let's explain.
It is a theoretical framework that allows us to look at the laws and the systems in this country and to see how they are oftentimes unbalanced when it comes to certain people groups.
Critical race theory, though, is not currently taught in any Florida school, but Black history is mandated by state law.
Our education standards not only don't prevent, but they require teaching Black history, all the important things. That's part of our core curriculum. And, I view it as American history. I don't view it as separate history.
But some say it isn't being taught the way it should.
There are 67 school districts, 67 counties. Only 12 of them have been deemed to be doing an exemplary job in teaching African American history.
If we are really to teach American history, there's no way to do it and not include the history made by Black people.
Over the last few years, we've seen just how important conversations about race can be. In some cases, it is literally a matter of life and death.
It shouldn't have been a place that got forgotten.
54 graves at a shuttered school left a Clearwater community grappling with grief. Archaeologists found the graves after we brought concerns to the school district about an old Black cemetery on this property.
It's the first time we have ever heard that there was a cemetery there.
This is just one of many of the Black cemeteries archaeologists have uncovered across the entire Tampa Bay area. Cemeteries destroyed for redevelopment. It all started after Ray Reed, who used to work for Hillsborough County, came forward with research about missing cemeteries. That research sparked a 2019 Tampa Bay Times investigation that led archaeologists to nearly 300 graves from Tampa's erased Zion Cemetery under apartments and businesses. Reed's research also led crews to find 145 more graves in a field at King High School. And just a few months ago, archaeologists confirmed a total of 328 graves at the Frank Crum staffing firm and underneath Missouri Avenue in Clearwater. There have also been searches at MacDill Air Force Base and Tropicana Field.
Consideration was not given to Black people during that time, and we are still having to fight those battles today.
Finding refuge in faith. Next, we'll show you how Black churches became a safe haven for our community and the role it continues to play to this day.
Churches play a vital role in Black history, but they are so much more than places of worship.
They offer hope, opportunity, and a sense of community that too often we were not granted.
The church was the hub of the community.
Places of faith that opened in the face of adversity.
The fact is that when we opened our churches, is because the white church didn't want us a part of that.
Reverend Wayne Thompson says since their inception, Black churches like First Baptist Institutional in St. Pete have operated for the Lord in spite of racism.
You have to realize that I grew up here in this city, segregated. Everything was separate.
And longtime members say through forced moves, 2 pandemics, Jim Crow, and more, generations of this congregation have always managed to stay together.
It's like home. It's like home. Family, love is all here.
And this isn't the only church in St. Pete that's made it through tough times.
You can't have community without unity, and the church is a place where that unity represents itself.
Over at historic Bethel AME, the proof of longevity is right there in the name.
The oldest church in one location in the city, not just the oldest Black church, but the oldest church.
And some parts of the church are more like a museum with century-old artifacts. But Reverend Kenny Irby says Black churches don't just hold history that was once pushed aside, they're a part of it.
Dr. King and the Freedom Riders, they were all really committed to using the network of churches, regardless of denominations, right? It was God's house.
While the outside world will continue to change, these faith leaders say some things never will.
What we do here is often imitated but never duplicated.
Nothing changes our faith. Nothing changes our approach to worship. It's going to live because of the people that it serves.
It's time to let the music play. We'll show you how Tampa became the Harlem of the South and how it inspired one of the biggest names in music. Through times of heightened racial injustice, a culture of black business, food, music, and entertainment was born here, giving Tampa the nickname the Harlem of the South. Liz Crawford shows us how it all came about.
You might have driven by here 1,000 times. Just before the 275 I-4 split, Perry Harvey Senior Park stands in what used to be an epicenter of Black America.
I remember the confidence that walking down Central Avenue gave every black young man and every black young woman.
Tampa was segregated like everywhere else in the South at the time.
Lined with black-owned businesses, packed with black patrons, and bustling with black culture.
Doctors, attorneys, you had the first library for blacks in Tampa, the Harlem Branch Library.
But it was the entertainment that really made Central Avenue dazzle.
People came from miles around to see the entertainers, to enjoy their performances, and to eat at those restaurants that serve chitlins and collard greens and candied yams.
Soul food, the perfect accompaniment to soul music. Tampa, Florida had a profound impact on the one and only Ray Charles.
Ray Charles made his first recording just a block away from Central Avenue here in Tampa, and that's documented in his autobiography.
That first recording, St. Pete, Florida Blues.
Now, why would he name a song for St. Pete that he wrote in Tampa? He explained because he said he wanted white people to buy this record. This was his first record. And he knew that more white people had heard of St. Petersburg because of the beaches than had heard of Tampa.
Today, a Ray Charles Boulevard stands 2 blocks away from where he recorded that song.
But this was his home for 2 years. And then when he left here, he went to the West Coast, Seattle, and then LA, and the rest is history.
You had a lot of the musicians that would come to town, they would have jam sessions.
Central Avenue's Cotton Club played host to some of the all-time greats.
Duke Ellington, who's known worldwide, Ella Fitzgerald.
Today, the street is gone.
It was a little wider than this,
but not forgotten.
But this is the footprint of the original Central Avenue.
A hub of heritage.
Tampa was called the Harlem of the South for good reason.
A mural remains.
So there's Ray Charles at the piano, and there's Ella Fitzgerald at the microphone. You see the man and the woman doing the twist right there.
Where the music used to move the soul.
But I'm just thankful that I was alive during the heyday of Central Avenue. I saw it firsthand. I know of which I speak.
Definitely a fascinating part of the Bay Area, and you can still enjoy it to this day.
And it's just a piece of the Black history that helped build our community.
A piece of our heart, our hope, our history.